Good day, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to NBS Radio. I'm joined by our newcomer Robespierre, who has recently been appointed as the deputy of 3 separate ministries and has also been doing very well in the NPA. It's wonderful to have you on the show. Is this your first NBS broadcast?
Actually, yes, it is. Very great to be here on Northern Broadcast Service Programming. So, thank you for hosting me and thank you for inviting me.
How are you today?
Doing pretty decently. To everyone, happy Memorial Day. Hope your Memorial Day is going well, and let's not forget all our fallen soldiers out there.
That's right. I think we have, within the NPA, I think it's Laws and Gladio and,
Quiet
I
Dad.
want to say Quiet Dad, yeah.
Quiet Dad.
Do you know of anyone else in the North Pacific who is a veteran who deserves being honored?
Me personally, no, but I'm sure there's probably more with how large our region is.
Well, to all of you out there, thank you for serving. It's great that we have such a fine day to, make sure that you guys get the recognition you deserve.
Definitely. So, huge thank you to everyone who served, who continues to serve, and those who have fallen in service.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's get this started. I'll just go with a typical icebreaker to begin the interview. Why did you choose your name? Robespierre seems like an odd choice.
It is an odd choice. It's more so I've been doing more, I guess, French philosophy, learning about that. And of course, Maximilien Robespierre was a popular figure during the French Revolution. And I guess he's sort of seen in two ways. If you ask some people, Robespierre's a tyrant. If you ask other people, he was, of course, an idealist. He was a visionary. So I think that definitely adds a sort of level of depth to who I can be in nation states. Some may see me some way, some may see me another way. So that's essentially why I chose it.
How do you see the name?
I see it as though he was an idealist. That was the time of enlightenment. So I think a lot of his ideals and a lot of the things that the French Revolution stood for sort of lay the foundation for what we have in the Western democracy for today's world.
For those who see Robespierre as a tyrant, what do you have to say to them? Is there any solace that we can find? Are you in any way trying to coup the North Pacific?
No, I have no desire to coup the North Pacific. We have a great leadership with you in charge as a delegate, so I wouldn't ever want to, upset you or anything.
Thank you so much. All right, well,
No
that
problem.
icebreaker out of the way, we'll really get started with the interview here. As I said at the beginning, you've been appointed as the deputy of 3 separate ministries. I think that's World Assembly Affairs, Communications, and Home Affairs.
Yes, that's correct. Home Affairs, Communications, and World Assembly Affairs. Yes.
And you've already been doing very well in the North Pacific Army, having risen a few of the ranks already. So I guess it's fair to say that you've been making quite a name for yourself. Could you talk a little bit about your nation-state's history prior to joining the North Pacific? Because I know you're not exactly a new nation.
Right, I'm definitely not new to nation states itself. Coming up on the end of this month, which it basically is the end of the month since it's the 26th, 27th, 26th. I've been in nation states for 5 years now. This is my 5th year anniversary. So I started off with my first year being essentially a user-created region founder. That was not a very successful region, suffice to say. I think the highest populace we ever got in that region was about 20 to 30 nations, which at the time seemed like definitely a good amount. But going from a UCR founder, and actually for the first year of my nation states career, I was a defender. So it's kind of interesting. In the first year of nation states, I was a defender, but for the last 4 years, I've been a raider. So,
What made you switch sides?
funny story. So I had been the prime minister of an organization known as the ORCA, the Organization for Regional Cooperation, and Advancement. So the ORCA was basically the multi-regional alliance that was, again, for the purposes of defending. I was their prime minister, a trusted member. I'd been their region of military affairs, I think, commander of their defense personnel. Basically, I was in the government a lot. I was their 3-time prime minister, and the reason I switched sides was because I became a double agent for Den, actually. And I essentially destroyed the organization from within.
Incredible. So what have you spent the last 4 years doing then? You mentioned the first year was like a UCR, and then what has been going on more recently prior to joining the North Pacific?
Yeah, the first year, full year of Nation States was basically me being a defender and a UCR founder. After that, I moved out to Den, which at that point had not been, I guess, absolutely destroyed by moderation from the Predator scandal. So I enlisted in Den a couple months before it eventually collapsed. And in that time, I attained the rank of corporal in Den. Didn't really have that much time to actually contribute back then because, of course, the region was failing. But I was trained by a guy by the name of Ivo, or Not, as some people will know him. He was the one who first taught me how to raid. So I learned raiding, and then Den collapsed, which was, I guess, my first gameplay event that I remember. The earliest gameplay event that I recall specifically was the Black Riders falling to United German Regions after their founder was deleted. That's the earliest recollection I have. But since then, I've been largely cosmopolitan.
I was there for that actually when the Predator scandal went down, and I had up until that point been serving in another UCR, and I was charged with infiltrating the Black Riders, which didn't go very well. But I probably know quite a few of the people that you knew back then as well.
I would
Anyway,
imagine so.
I think it's actually quite interesting that we have a similar history in that regard, having first been defenders before later, joining forces with the Raiders to some extent. Although you fully, switched sides, I didn't quite do that. Um, anyway, what made you come join the North Pacific after 5 years in the game?
I was actually coming off a 4 month hiatus. So between the months of January 2019 to May 2019, which is I actually joined on the 2nd of May, so the same month as this, I was coming off a 4 month hiatus. And in the 5 years that I've played Nation States, I've had two major hiatuses, each for 4 months. And coming off of that, I recalled that a former player who shall not be named because he's DOS had told me that if I ever wanted somewhere to go, I could always ask Mad Jack. And I know that you all host Mad Jack. He's a phenomenal TNPer. So I got in contact with Mad Jack, and essentially I was brought here.
That's a great story. What has sort of set the North Pacific apart from other regions that has made you stay so far?
I think in large part it's due to the wonderful community that we have in the North Pacific, or more so, the sense of community we have in the North Pacific. Because if you think about it, the North Pacific is obviously the largest region in nation states. I mean, that's definitely evident as by its nation count. But it's more so the fact how we as a region can have that staggering a nation count, but also maintain a sort of sense of tight knit closeness offsite that's on the forums, on Discord, through other mediums of social media. So I think that's definitely a great thing that the North Pacific has going for it, how we can stay connected in such a big place.
It's definitely fantastic and is one of the reasons why I love it here so much. What has your experience been like so far?
Overwhelmingly positive, I would say. And I'm definitely a more bluntly honest type person. So I don't really sugarcoat anything when I say it. So that's why when I answer the questions that I'm sure you'll propose to me today, you can be honest about them because I'm not very keen on hiding what I'm thinking. So I would say that my experience in the North Pacific thus far has been overwhelmingly positive. I don't have any qualms whatsoever with anything that's happened.
It's great that you're bluntly honest about things. I tend to be the same way. It helps that we can get, honest feedback from people so that we can improve how we conduct ourselves and the programs that we have to bring newcomers on board. And it's moreover quite interesting to interview newcomers like yourself in order to get a fresh perspective on those programs that we have. I know that you just said that you have no qualms with anything that's happened to you, but do you think that there's anything that we can improve upon when it comes to bringing new people on board and making sure that they can get involved?
And it's worked fairly well for me. I really haven't had any roadblocks in the process to getting where I am. I think something that the North Pacific does extremely well is it makes certain aspects of getting involved easily accessible. So from citizenship, after I passed all three checks, it's like at that moment I was automatically eligible for the executive staff. And I think it's a great segue for newcomers like myself to the TNP scene to get involved with government and have that sort of voice and have that sort of hand in what goes on behind the scenes. So something that TNP does very well, I think, to newcomers is that they make things easily accessible. There's a plethora of ways to get involved, and that's definitely something that I've taken to since you named all of the things I've done thus far.
Have people been encouraging? Have you gotten the help that you need and the mentorship that is necessary to sort of build a career here in the North Pacific?
Very much so. And in a previous broadcast that was recorded a few days ago, he gave me a shout out. So I'm going to reciprocate that by giving him a shout out. Bob Areno, who is my official TNP mentor. Thank you to you and everything that you've done these past few weeks that I've been here. You're a major influence on me, and I appreciate you. Coming into the North Pacific, I applied for mentorship, not because I was new to nation states, but more so just new to the North Pacific. And of course, it's a big place, so I wanted to have a sort of guiding hand in getting involved, and he's been that guiding hand for me. So thank you, Barbarino.
Do you see Barbarino as a role model then?
I see him as, he's definitely a great person to have around. He's someone I've become increasingly close with over the last few days, just talking to him out of character and things of that nature. As far as a role model goes, yes. I think there are many people in the North Pacific, such as yourself, Palaith, or Ghost, Mad Jack, people that you can look up to, and people that have obviously made their careers in nation states off of doing what they do well. So, yes.
Do you think that part of the reason that you found such early success is because you're very proactive rather than the programs that we have here sort of helping you into things? Or is it really just sort of both are, working together to achieve that sort of outcome?
I mean, to some degree, and I'm definitely not going to discredit the programs that we have in place. But I will say, to some degree, yes. It does involve me being somewhat proactive because I'm actively seeking to get involved in more things and to contribute more than, say, just the average run-of-the-mill newcomer. But definitely the programs that we have in place do provide a great structure for me to become proactive. It makes it a lot more easy a job for me to become proactive in this system than it would be in, say, a less developed region.
One of the programs that we've recently just gotten started using is the NS Card program. And I don't know if it's had any effect on you, but I'm wondering, do you think it would? Do you think that would be in any way motivating? Or is it something that you're not really interested in?
I myself, on a personal account, am not very, I guess, involved in the card collection game. It doesn't interest me as much compared to things such as gameplay or roleplay, both of which I'm involved in. But I definitely think for people getting into nation states or people coming to the North Pacific who are interested in cards, that could definitely be a big motivating factor if they had like a drive to enhance their collection or add to that collection. For me, it's not a big thing, but I think for others it could definitely be a helpful tool in getting them in the door.
Back to, I guess, your future in the region and whatnot. There's been a few people in the past who have had difficulty in elections due to a lack of experience and sort of a lack of integration with the community. I always think it's really sad to see because these people have, so much potential if only they would get involved. But do you think for you there's any glass ceiling on what you can achieve here?
I don't like to put a glass ceiling on, I guess, the ceiling or the way that I could reach my potential because I view a glass ceiling as a sort of barrier, and I don't think here in the North Pacific we have to have barriers. I don't think it has to be a cap on what we're able to achieve. So I think one of the things that I myself attribute to my successes thus far, and things that I've done in other regions, I've always sort of had a knack for capitalizing on opportunity. I think opportunity is a big thing that the North Pacific offers. Opportunity is a huge thing that we involve ourselves with. So I think part of the reason I'm successful is because I capitalize on the opportunity. And I think if anyone else out there wants to be successful as well, they could also capitalize on the same opportunity.
There have been a lot of comparisons between you and Barbarino, your mentor. in part due to your swift rise in the North Pacific Army. Do you think there's any truth to those comparisons, and do you intend to follow in Barbarino's footsteps?
I think there's a certain degree of truth to those. I've been compared to Barbarino. I've been compared to you. I think one or two people have compared me even to Ghost. So I think to some degree, yes, those comparisons are in a way accurate, but I don't see myself molding my path forward after a previous TNPer. I think what I'm more going to do is focus on the objectives I know I'm able to achieve. And people who'd like to compare me to those people, I consider it a great honor to be compared to phenomenal players and people who have contributed here for a long time and do great at their jobs, obviously. So it's definitely an honor to be compared to such people.
Um, are you at all worried that by joining so many ministries all at the same time, you might get burnt out?
No, not particularly. And in a DM conversation I had the other day, I finished up a project or mini project for Home Affairs, and Marcus Antonius talked to me. He was like, I asked for the next project, and he said something along the lines of, I hope you don't get burnt out. And my response to that was, why would I get burnt out? So everyone knows that in the summer months, nation states activity obviously increases. So for me personally, the summer months are definitely going to be a time where I have a lot of schedules opening up to where I'm able to do more things. So for the prospective future, I definitely don't see myself getting burnout. And even when we return to the fall months, I'm still not really going to get burnt out. Because if history has taught me anything, in the past 5 years, I never really have been burnt out.
I'm glad to hear that you're going to be active over the summer because I actually see it very much the other way around. Instead of nation states becoming more active in the summer months, I see it as becoming less active in the summer months. Seems to it seems contradictory to the nature that most people are still in school and would have more time over the summer. But there's something called the summer lull, which is the effect that certain people end up actually becoming less active over the summer. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to be around at the very least, and I hope other people stick around for sure. This should be a successful term if you do.
Yeah, and I definitely imagine it will be quite a successful term. Being in gameplay, it seems like gameplay activity definitely increases, and I think that's where I was going with the previous comment. Gameplay activity tends to increase because obviously, major update, people don't have to go to bed at certain times or wake up at certain times the next day. So I think that's why you see gameplay activity increase. But overall activity, yes, I'll definitely be here, and I'll definitely continue to be extremely active.
Understood. Looking forward to it. So, as I've mentioned already like 5 times in this podcast already, you're deputy in 3 ministries: WA, HA, and comms. Which one has been your favorite so far?
I'm sort of biased towards World Assembly Affairs. And of course, that ministry is headed by Tlomes or Tlomas, depending on how you pronounce his name. But the Ministry of World Assembly Affairs is definitely an interesting one because it's widely regarded throughout the nation states world as being one of the finest ministries we have, offsite and onsite. So it's great to be not only involved in that capacity with that ministry, but it's also great to be the deputy minister of such ministry and get valuable lessons from the actual minister who's been behind it all.
It's been pretty quiet recently in the World Assembly. Do you think there's a reason for that?
As someone who's passed a Security Council resolution once myself, I tend to emphasize more the research process. To me, the research process is absolutely essential to any proposal that is to be written. So I think when you see less proposals being written, that doesn't always mean that proposals aren't in the works. So less people submitting them and less them being on the immediate horizon, I think, there could definitely be some in the works that we don't know about yet. And of course, in the coming term, I'm sure there will be plenty for the World Assembly Ministry to work on.
I'm sure there will be. What makes you so interested in the World Assembly? What is it that drives you forward?
Two things actually. My, I guess, sort of desire to have something written in concrete wording that sort of gives recognition to someone they deserve. So The reason I mentioned the Security Council previously is because the Security Council is largely involved with nation states gameplay. A lot of the proposals that come through there are liberations or commendations slash condemnations for game players. But in the proposal that I passed, it was for a role player. So I think something that drives me in the World Assembly is that I'm able to write proposals for role players, people who often get overlooked or people who often don't get the credit they deserve for the jobs they do. Role players are a huge part of the nation states community altogether, so I don't think the Security Council has to be just for game players.
It's great that you see a big, use in the Security Council as well as the General Assembly, because a lot of the time I feel like people focus too much on the General Assembly, and think that's all that the WA is.
I myself, fully admittedly, I myself am not as well versed in the workings of the General Assembly. That's actually something that Minister Talomes is going to be working with me on over the coming term. But just to have people focus on the General Assembly, yes, it was the very first chamber that the World Assembly, or back then UN, had to offer. But I don't think that it's the only thing that people should focus on. And I think people can look at the Security Council and even the role playing proposals that authors like myself write and say, oh, it's not just game players, it's not just nation state stats. It can also be role players, or it can also be community members. It can be people who make the game more fun for others.
That's definitely fantastic. I'm glad you have that perspective. Out of the three ministries that you're a part of right now, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for you this term?
The biggest challenge will be communications, the Ministry of Communications, the very people who put out this same podcast. So, and I think the reasoning for that being is that here in the North Pacific, the Ministry of Communications does so many things. And coming off of your successful tenure, we definitely, I guess, so to speak, have large shoes to fill. And when it comes to me being a deputy minister under Ghost, I have full confidence in Ghost. He'll be a phenomenal minister, I know. But the reason I see it as the most challenging is because we do so many things here in communications, and it'll just be a matter of me learning all of that. Luckily for me, the learning curve has never been something that I've struggled with, so hopefully I'll be able to become well versed in everything that we do here.
Do you think that the Ministry of Communications has become too large for its own shoes? Sort of that it should split apart into, two ministries, one that does sort of written publications and the other that does NBS?
I don't think that you need a separate ministry specifically for audio communications because I like having the Northern Broadcast Service as a sort of, I guess, offshoot of the Ministry of Communications or a sort of subsequent line that's drawn there. I think the Ministry of Communications is very large in comparison to, say, the Ministry of Culture. But when you have the two working in tandem, or you have communications doing a sort of event in collaboration with culture or anything of that nature, I think it's beneficial to have the Ministry of Communications be this large and be this well staffed because it opens up opportunities to work with other ministries.
Speaking of staffing, have you found the Ministry of Communications by any chance understaffed? Because that was sort of the problem that we were having last term, and is one of the reasons why I'm taking such a focus in Home Affairs this term, is because I want to bring more people on board and become more active in our offsite community and in our executive ministries, because at least in other ministries, there's definitely some sort of staffing issues, but I don't know if that necessarily applies to communications anymore with you around.
Right, and so I definitely sort of see what you're talking about in that regard. What I would say to that is, in going again to the previous comment I made about the staffing of communications, the staff for which we already do have within our roster are very talented. They're very adept at doing their jobs correctly, and they're very competent in doing so. So I think the thing that the Ministry of Communications has going for it, and really across the board in the leadership of various ministries, is that the talent pool we have in the North Pacific is great. For the people who are in leadership, they're doing their jobs well, and they're, of course, contributing a lot. So as far as recruiting more staffers, absolutely, that's a thing that we should definitely be prioritizing. But as far from the top down, it's looking very good as far as the people who are in positions to do things are doing them well.
Are you interested in, by any chance, joining the other ministries as well?
If I was asked to come to any ministry, I think any ministry in the North Pacific that anyone wanted me in, for the purposes of serving the North Pacific, I would come to that ministry. But for the three ministries that I'm currently in, and I know I spoke with you about this previously, I definitely want to sort of assert my presence in those ministries, build off what I've already been sort of capitalizing on that opportunity, build off of what I've already achieved thus far. So I can establish a constant and consistent presence, sort of concrete founding in those ministries, so that when I'm in those ministries, people know that I'm contributing, people know that I'm active, and people know that I'm involved. Once I secure that foundation, I can branch out into, say, the Ministry of Culture.
Is that mostly due to a lack of interest in the other ministries, or a lack of experience, or just sort of time restrictions in general?
Right. So in previous UCRs, I was actually a military affairs slash foreign affairs specialist. So I'm actually pretty versed in foreign affairs on nation states, which would seem kind of odd considering I'm not involved with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in the North Pacific. It's not really due to a lack of, I guess, knowledge or general knowledge about the ministry's workings, but more so, I didn't want to join all of them across the board and then have my performance in some of them suffer. I'd rather start with the three that I know I can handle, and again, build on that foundation. And once I get that foundation built, I'll see if I can open up other opportunities.
That makes sense. How do you think the term has been going so far?
It's been going smoothly, I'd say. We definitely have clear objectives, and that's something that I thank you for. As someone who's coming into TNP, it's good to know what's expected of you, number one, and number two, where we're looking to head. So, the general direction of ministries, I think that's something you've done very well as a delegate so far in your first few weeks in office. I know for the Ministry of Home Affairs, you have specific objectives listed for us. So, that's very helpful, and I think it's great to have that sort of vision and that sort of direction.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that vision? Any sort of change that you'd like to make? Any commentary on sort of the campaign that I ran and where you think that we should be going instead?
And I definitely think that, and this is coming from personal bias, but I think that the Ministry of Defense, definitely, if you're more focusing on the recruitment, definitely recruit more for the North Pacific Army. The personnel that we have there are very good raiders. They're very fine personnel. They're very fine updaters. But the more that we have, the more power and the more strength that we have. Of course, strength comes from within. It starts in our community, but I think of the NPA as an offshoot of that, to where the NPA can be strong and it can be reflective of our strength as a community. So if there was any sort of commentary that I would put out there, it's that, I guess, do more to recruit for the North Pacific Army, because more numbers is obviously better.
I definitely agree with that. I should definitely put more focus towards recruiting for the NPA rather than just sort of encouraging people to, apply for citizenship or the executive staff ministries. I will say that we are considering expanding NS card programs to, help recruit for the NPA, like having a signing bonus perhaps, or, getting a certain NS card for, doing a certain number of missions, or for one of your ideas the other day, I think, was collecting, certain NS cards that represent, former MODs or, defense leadership over the years. And I think those probably will help to some extent, but yeah, I think definitely we should be doing more for the NPA and making sure that the focus there is pretty good.
Of course, and going back to previously what I said about cards, for me personally, I'm going to be involved with the NPA regardless. But for other people who may just be joining nation states or maybe are new to the North Pacific, I think the added incentive of putting cards out there and saying, "Oh, you can collect these cards," and there are added bonuses and added variables that could, I guess, sort of reward people for their activity and participation. I think for other people that could definitely be an attention grabber to the NPA and being involved with that.
So, aside from the North Pacific Army, which I know you're very vocal about, is there any one change you'd like to make to the region?
Just the region in general.
Yeah, just anything, if there's anything specific that you have in mind that has been bothering you in some way, or that you'd think deserves to be improved, I'd like to hear it.
And not to be a poster child, because I really don't have anything that I think is something that's been bothering me. And I'm not just going to say that because, you're here or anything, but this is what I tell anyone. I don't have anything that I think really at this point that I'd be upset about or that I'd feel that could be done better. Because since I've only been here the amount of time that I have, I'm sort of still getting a feel for the overall atmosphere at certain times or the influential people that are involved with our region. So as far as an outlook or an overview of just the region itself, what could be done better, I think on my part, I definitely need to spend more time looking at that and proactively, once again, going back to the word proactively seeking out ways that we can improve as a region. That burden not only falls upon the delegate or the vice delegate or the security council or anyone else. I think the individuals in the citizenry can contribute to making our region a better place. So for me personally, I would definitely look at that. But at this time, I don't really have an immediate answer for that because, again, I'm very much so pleased with everything happening.
All right, well, not to make you the poster child, but what has been your favorite single experience here in the North Pacific so far?
North Pacific Army raids. And you probably knew I was going to say that.
I
But
did. I did. I figured you would, but I wanted to hear you say it anyway.
yeah. So, I mean, I just like being involved with gameplay. It's not the primary reason I'm on nation states. I enjoy nation states governments too. That's why I'm involved with the TNP government, but I think it's to me it's more than just let's go hit a few targets. To me, it's getting the North Pacific's name out there. I mean, we don't really need that publicity considering we're already the largest region, but it's more of a shout out to the people back here and the people who make this region great. So when we're out there tagging and putting our name on things, I think it's a definite way that we can project ourselves out and say, "Come join this great region, and this great community here will foster you." So being out on raids is definitely a great thing because people like our MOD, Barbarino, or General Quiet Dad, General Zaz, General Malfi, or Mouth, however you want to pronounce his name. You know, NPA raids are great, but you want my answer from aside from the NPA?
Anything you want to give?
I'd say the roleplay community actually, because before I entered my 4 month hiatus, that eventually led to me coming here. I'd been sort of intrigued with roleplay, which is odd considering the previous 3 years I hadn't really cared that much. But there was sort of, I guess, a change of face in me where I was like, you know what? I might want to get interested in roleplay. And I think that creative writing is definitely something that I could excel in. So I would say one of my other best memories so far in the North Pacific is the warm reception I got from the roleplay community and the things I'll be doing with them in the coming months. So yeah,
Have you joined one of the maps?
I have joined the map. It's in Eris, the continent Cravener, and my neighbor is actually our Minister of Culture, Pradania. So he's my neighbor to the north on the map. So I'll be doing some interactions with him in character over the coming week or so, and I'll go from
That's great. Have you ever considered joining the RMB roleplay community as well?
No, honestly, I haven't, and the reasoning behind that is that to me, the roleplay R&B community it seems to move too fast for my personal taste. If to each their own, the R&B RPers are definitely people that I respect for what they do, and they're definitely a huge part of what makes our region look active on site. And the things that they're doing are very good, I'm sure. But for me, the rate at which the R&B moves, and the fact that we get thousands of messages a day, it would seem more difficult for me to truly dedicate myself to that and to also monitor what events are going on at one point in time. So that's the reason I haven't really decided on I haven't decided against going to the R&B community for RP, but I also am content to stay on the forums.
Understood. As a deputy minister of communications and as a incoming role player, I don't know if you've heard of any of the recent controversy over one of our recent publications, the Roleplay Reel. And while it might be a little soon to get your thoughts on that as a role player because you're only just getting your feet wet in that community, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the criticism of the roleplay reel is justified, or do you think that it sort of deserves to be given a chance?
Not to demonstrate a clear lack of knowledge or glaring lack of knowledge in this area, but could you please familiarize me with the criticism that the roleplay reel has got?
So basically, in general, it was there's a number of people who don't want to have their role plays be used as sort of like an advertisement for the North Pacific because they don't believe that that's necessary. But that's not really what the roleplay reel was meant to be. It's sort of, meant to be like a place where you can show off to like other people within the region and help encourage people to get into, role playing as well and boost that participation. So, the Ministry of Culture is all about roleplay promotion, and this is one way that they can do that. I guess in that sense, it sort of is an advertisement, but I don't know. I just wanted to see if you would have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from that. Okay. So it's not too early to get my comments on that because I'm generally very vocal. Again, I'm not shy to have my opinions known. So I'll be vocal on it and say that I think there's a generally simple solution to this. So the roleplay reel was obviously not intended as, any sort of slap on the wrist to the RPers who don't want their works used as advertisements. That's definitely not the intention here. So I think a way that we could definitely sort of correct that sort of criticism or improve upon that and make the roleplay reel better is we can have people who specifically don't want their works used in that capacity to simply not have their work on that publication if they'd like. So it goes back to creators who don't want their works as advertisements. I think we can go to them and have a civil discussion and we can say, all right, if you don't want to have your work advertised, that's perfectly fine. We respect, what you do with your writing and we're going to be observant of that. So I don't think that it has to be we're going to include it in any way or we're just going to leave it off. I think it can be on a case by case basis. If say I wrote something and I didn't want it on there, which wouldn't happen because I would gladly hand it over. But if I wrote something and I didn't want it on there, I would much rather have someone come to me and say, is this okay? Or do we have your permission for this? Than to just simply use it and then have a complaint be lodged. I think the roleplay reel is a great outlet for people to share their ideas, people to share that sort of creative energy, and people to express themselves in a way that only writing and roleplay can. So I think the roleplay reel definitely serves a great purpose, but I also think we could do better to, make it to where those who don't want to have their works featured don't have to.
That's great. All right. Going forward, what do you think you'll be most interested in the North Pacific?
You know, I talked briefly with you and I think a couple others about where I see my future going in this region. Um, so going back to what I said earlier, I definitely want to establish a constant and consistent presence in the ministries to which I'm involved. I definitely want to continue my work with the NPA and rank up because once I rank up from sergeant, which is what I'm at currently, once I rank up to warrant officer or a lieutenant, I'll officially be in the officer corps, meaning I can trigger raids, which I'm excited about because it means that I'll be able to provide opportunities to our other soldiers and lead raids with them. So I'm excited for that. Um, you know, I guess networking with people in the community, getting to know them more on both an in character and out of character basis, sort of building up my profile in roleplay. I can definitely see myself getting more involved in government than what I already am. And just anything that I can do that'll help serve the North Pacific and make it a better place for others, including myself.
In the next year or so, what would you like to achieve here in the North Pacific? Do you have any interest in running for an elected office? And if so, which one?
You know, I think I've heard about it on specifically the NBS before. I've heard about people telling stories to the point where other people had asked them to run for elective office. And I think in the event that that were to ever happen to me, or in the event that a sitting delegate or a person of authority comes to me and says, can we have you do this job in this office, in this capacity for this ministry? Ministry positions, I would accept that if offered them. Because the way I see it, it's essentially a trusted official in government saying, we know this person can help our region, and we know that we can trust them to do so. So I would take that graciously, and I would accept a minister position if offered it in the perspective next year or so. And I think beyond that, we would have to go from there as far as like higher office. Because again, I'm not a crystal ball and I can't predict the future, nor anyone could. So I think, again, I don't have to put a ceiling on my potential. What people want me to be versus what I can be will be an interesting balance because I think I can be a lot of what people in this region might want me to be. It's just a matter of, capitalizing on opportunity, continuing to contribute, and putting in the work to deserve to where I get.
Well, I definitely think that you have a lot of potential in the region, and I would love to see where you end up going, and I'll definitely be around to see that, hopefully. At this point, I have run out of my questions, and if Praetor in the audience or anyone else has anything, they can definitely contribute that now. Otherwise, I guess we'll begin closing off the broadcast.
Does Praetor have anything?
All right, so he asked, what is the worst thing about TNP?
What is the worst thing about TNP? All right, I actually do have an answer. And maybe I could have mentioned this when he was talking about things I think we could do better on. Because again, I really said there's nothing that bothered me. Something I've noticed, not particularly something that's bothered me, but something I've noticed, is that there are a few people, and I'm not going to name names because obviously I don't like bear grudge to anyone or anything like that, and I definitely don't hold anything against them for this because I think this is just the overall general atmosphere. But I've noticed in certain capacities, in certain activities in the region, people are very much set in the precedence of things, which is perfectly fine because if precedence proves anything, it's that the North Pacific is vastly successful. But I think if there was one thing that I wouldn't want to label it bad because it could be good as well. But the only thing I say that we could maybe break down the barrier, because I don't believe in barriers, break down the barrier between the order of precedence in how things should be, but also opening up ourselves to new ideas of how things could be if we allow them to. So hopefully that sufficiently answers your question.
Wondrous has a question that I feel has probably already been answered to some extent, but I guess we can bear to address it again. His question is, why is the North Pacific such a successful region?
The North Pacific is such a successful region because it's great with outreach, and it combines a warm, welcoming community with everything that sort of politics enthusiasts like myself would desire. We can have debates in the North Pacific. We can role play in the North Pacific. We can serve the NPA in the North Pacific. We can endotart in the North Pacific. We can R&B post in the North Pacific. There's nothing that this one region doesn't really have to offer. It's such a big place, and again, the ease of accessibility. There's so many things to get involved with that I think part of our success is attributed to just the utility players we are in the nation states world. We excel in so many different areas, and I think it provides such great ways for people like myself to get involved and people to stay on and become interested. So I think that helps our success.
Praetor asks the following question. You've been in a few political regions. What are your thoughts on our politics? From the competitiveness of our elections to evaluating performance of candidates. Other regions frequently use polls to evaluate performance and have more independent media. Do you have any thoughts on that matter?
Definitely. So something I've already taken into account is that for the North Pacific, we seem to be extremely organized, which for such a large region is really astounding because the level of organization that I'm referring to here is that when I've asked questions about archives or things of that nature, there are literally graphs that have been made out either by, I think, scripts or by people handmade or spreadsheets of things of that nature. There's exact documentation to previous things that have happened to the point where if I want to know how many nations were in TNP in the summer of 2013, I could go find that. As an average citizen, I could go find that somewhere. And I think something that TNP's political scene does extremely well is we have a sort of accountability when it comes to office. The regional assembly can recall government officials. And I think that's definitely a power that the regional assembly should have. Because again, the regional assembly is opt in, meaning it's all citizen. So it's opt in and you can participate in it if you'd like to, or you can refrain from participating if you'd like to. But it adds a certain level of accountability to those in high elected office to the point where they have to always sort of govern with an even hand because they know that they'll be held accountable to their citizenry, and we can trust that our elected officials are of the top caliber talent. So as far as our political scene, I'm very fond of it, and I could see myself getting involved with it in the coming months.
Wondrous asks, do you have any interest in being delegate someday? I know you already answered, in general, you don't want to cap off your potential, but do you have any interest in that specific position?
Um, so things that I've told people who have brought subjects like that up is that I don't have any one specific thing that I'm gunning for. There's not one thing that I'm out to achieve specifically, like a straight shot. I think of it more as a staircase. There are lower level government positions like staffing in the executive or, deputy ministers that I think if you contribute and you do well in that capacity, you will be rewarded by getting to serve your region in a higher capacity. So I sort of see it as a sort of like step ladder or working your way up the corporate ladder, so to speak. You can pay your dues and you can do great things for the North Pacific and have it be a great place, and you will be rewarded in that. So I think starting off from one of the lower steps on the staircase, I could, in theory, with the ceiling on my potential that I do not believe exists because I think my potential could be limitless, I think that I could climb that sort of staircase. But I know that I'll meet people along the way and interact with people along the way who will help me in doing so. And I trust that our community here in the North Pacific will foster that sort of energy and ambition. It's more of a straight shot answer to your question. Delegate. If I continue to do what I'm doing now, maybe someday.
Aquila has a question from the Agora chat. His question is it difficult having so many roles all at the same time?
I'm someone who likes to be busy, and that's just part of my characteristic, I guess you could say. I enjoy being busy, and I absolutely despise boredom. So if I'm in all of these different roles and I wear these different hats in government and I'm constantly having things to do, I don't really see that as me being overworked or me getting burnt out. I see that as, well, I always have something to do. So I won't be bored with it, or I won't be complacent with the way things are. I can constantly strive to, put something out that I believe is of good quality, or I can constantly strive to, improve the region one project at a time. So for me, having all those different roles and saying, well, I can complete this project and know that there's another one lined up for me, I think, that's not really that inherently difficult for me. I know we've done it before, but if you want, we can talk elections and my thoughts on like how I vote and things of that nature, or like what I look for. We can talk about that.
Sure, why not? So, what do you look for in elections? What makes you vote the way you do, and what sort of candidates do you like to see in elections?
So I had the fortunate, I guess, timeliness of arriving right before the May general election cycle, which was a great thing because as soon as I became a citizen, there wasn't really a delay. I was automatically able to participate in the democratic process since I'd passed all the checks and I'd, applied for citizenship and been granted citizenship. So I think that was a great, initial impression because with TNP elections, obviously our voter turnout is second to none. And again, that's something I think makes our region great. How we have so many different voices, and those voices can be heard at any point in time, either through the RA or through general elections. What I look for in candidates, I don't like to vote off of, what most people, or not most people, but what the general knee jerk reaction is. The knee jerk reaction could be you see people, the first people who sign up, or the first people who post their platforms, or the first people who start campaigning. Those are the people you automatically start thinking of, and you're like, yeah, I'll vote for them. I don't really like to decide who I'm voting for that early on. I like to see what everyone has to offer. And the reason being, I judge candidates essentially on not only their standing within the region, not only their expertise and experience, but also the quality of their work, the consistency of their work, and also who offers the region what it, what it needs. So if I see candidate A sign up first, and I see candidate A campaign first, and I see candidate A register first, but then candidate B comes along maybe, a day after or so, and they have a more well put together platform and they have more well thought out ideas, and in my opinion, they can offer the region more, then I'm more inclined to vote for candidate B. Because just because they weren't the first face I saw doesn't mean that they don't have something to contribute or that they don't have something to offer. So I'd say there are 5 values that I look for in a candidate. I look for consistency. I look for competency. I look for those who are active and engaged. I look for engagement. I look for those who are proactive in what they do. People who aren't going to sit and wait for things to come to them, but come to terms with things themselves. And I also look to people who are obviously knowledgeable about what they're doing and definitely have the sort of vision. I think vision is a huge part of this because if you elect someone and then, let's say they complete goals A and B, but they don't have a C and they don't really have any other sort of direction, you're halfway through the term and they don't really have any direction to what they're doing or any vision in mind. So I think vision is definitely a thing that you have to bank on.
That's a great response. I'm actually quite impressed that you said you have 5 things that you look for, and then you proceeded to name exactly 5 things. I think that actually took a certain amount of thinking.
And I definitely like to think. Thinking, I would say, is definitely something that I just personally enjoy. Perhaps I overthink about things, but I really don't think when it comes to being involved with TNP politics, I don't really think that you can overthink. I think knowledge is power, and I think the more that you know, the better prepared you'll be. So let's see, I listed 5 things. Yeah. So another thing, the other knee-jerk reaction I was talking about is because I mentioned there was 2. The first one was about whoever's there first, whoever presents themselves first. And the second one is voting off of relationships or voting off of friendships. So I'll use the example of Barbarino. Barbarino is a great mentor to me. He's a great friend, and he's someone that I definitely, respect for what he does in TNP. If he were to vote for or run for higher office, let's say he was to run for vice delegate, but then someone comes along who I think, Barbarino being candidate A that I mentioned before, or maybe someone else being candidate B. Again, if candidate B, has more well thought ideas or, a vision, I wouldn't be as inclined to vote for Barbarino off that relationship because if he can't offer the North Pacific the best, then I simply wouldn't vote for him. Doesn't mean I won't support him on a personal account. I'm just not as inclined to look to personal friendships when it comes to democracy and when it comes to voting. I'll always look at who can offer the most to the region and who I believe is more equipped to do the job that they're running for. So I don't take in relationships.
That's a good answer. I am very much the same way, and I appreciate that there's others like you in the region as well. I'm going to take a question that Mick Masterdonia asked me in one of my AMAs on the regional message board so long ago, because I think it's a pretty interesting question and it's pretty universally applicable, especially with someone who has a lot of potential in the region to grow and do better. And, perhaps one day, I know you've been quite humble about it, but perhaps one day become, some elected official. It's important for, the regional population to know, what is your single greatest significant character flaw? Like, what do you think you could improve on while you're here? And what should we be looking out for?
I think it's eagerness, honestly. Because if you involve yourself in so much and do so much, then it's a question of how much you have left. So I think it's pacing yourself and what you have left and what you're able to still contribute, but then it's also knowing how much you can handle. So if you involve yourself in different ministries and you do your job well, and you, of course, progress through those ministries, then I think it's knowing what you can handle so that you don't disappoint. Other people may want you to do things, and if you think that you can do it and you know yourself well enough to say I can do it, then you do it. And if you don't think at that time it's convenient to you or that you could fulfill their request, then you don't. So I think the flaw would be the over involvement in a way, because I am so active that if you over involve yourself too much, it could be, sort of, I guess, impeding on other people's involvement. I'll use an example. The Home Affairs recruitment list that we send out. So I took 100 of those on the very first post, 100 lists out of like 300. Well, when I take 100, and it took me 3 days to do that, which is perfectly fine time since they're doing it weekly, but when you take 3 times to do that and you take them in chunks of 100, it gives people less opportunities to take out, say, 25 or 50. So I guess it's more your over involvement could, I guess, sort of impact their level of involvement too. So you have to balance the two.
That's definitely fair. I recommend with the lists that you take on Marcus Antonius's approach, which is to do sort of 25 or 50 at a time, and then if you're done and, the list still needs completing, then you can come back and claim more.
Oh yeah, after that, and I was happy to do the 100 list, but after that, I'm only taking 25 to 50 at a time, and then coming back for more if I am able.
Speaking about the recent elections a bit more, one of the things that was brought up and is actually currently being discussed within the regional assembly is what sort of do you see the Attorney General's office as being useful to the North Pacific, and is it something that we should keep around for the foreseeable future?
And I hate to be evasive in questions, but I need to take a look at the Agora Act, honestly, and I guess take a look at what's all going on in the regional assembly. But for the specific Attorney General position, I've been the Attorney General in other regions, and I've seen the way that they do it. As far as how it's applicable to the North Pacific, I'm unsure of yet, so I cannot form a concise opinion on whether or not it's useful to have an Attorney General or whether or not we'd better be off doing it a better way.
Fair enough. No problems.
Does anyone ask anything else?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you for your time. It was wonderful to have you here. I really hope that you enjoyed this podcast as much as I did, and we hope to have you on again sometime soon, hopefully.
It was great. Proud to be here. Happy to be here, and I'll definitely do it again in the future if asked.
For all of you who have been listening, this is NBS Radio closing out. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy your